And the GenWealth Radio Hour is off and running with our What's Happening segment, getting us started for the next 15 minutes. Welcome in. My name is Scott Inman, an advisor on the GenWealth team here in the West Little Rock office. Co-hosting today, GenWealth co-founder John Shrewsbury. Good to have you along.
Love to be here.
And you picked a really good one to be here for. We're going to really get on the government's tail a little bit today.
Well, I'm always game for that.
Yeah, a little bit of a disclaimer for our What's Happening topics today. So we dive in. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were about to say something.
Please.
You ready to go? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, here's the first one. We're going to talk about the Fed. Fed holds interest rates steady from a CNBC article. That's obviously news made recently last week. And here's what it means for credit cards, mortgages, car loans, and savings rates. And, of course, the big takeaway here was the Fed funds rate is keeping the rate steady, did not cut, did not raise. And, of course, that's always under the microscope when it comes to investing and the economy. Trying to figure out what the Fed's going to do next is it's a full-time job, John. I mean, honestly, people are always predicting the markets, and this was not off of the prediction. That was the expectation. So there wasn't a big shock when it happened. So the market took it in stride. But I think the underlying reasonings is worth talking about.
Sure. And, when you think about what's going on, you've got a war going on, you've got the economy is, depending on who you talk to, is either doing pretty well or it's terrible or whatever the case may be. The Fed doesn't really know what they want to do. They see the economy, they see the market going up, they see economic activity pretty strong, and so they don't have a need to cut interest rates in face of that. As a matter of fact, the Fed's modus operandi is to keep rates elevated so the economy doesn't overheat.
Yeah.
Now, that is much to the chagrin of the president. He wants interest rates to come down because that makes the bond market, go up. It makes the stock market go up, and it makes people happy when we have lower interest rates. Yeah. But Scott, I've got to camp out on this for just a second because, you and I both have been around long enough to remember that 2 or 3% interest rates were never the norm.
Right.
They were a really an aberration because of a myriad of different things. COVID was one of them. You just kind of go back in history, and while rates have been low since we had the great financial crisis, and they really bottomed out rates at that particular point in time, but it created a big sense of recency bias amongst people. And so they now think that a mortgage rate of 6% or something like that is incredibly high.
Right.
And heck, when I was growing up, interest rates on mortgages were 10%, and we did just fine. And so I think that there is a little bit of a cultural weird thing going on here where people have that recency bias about how rates were low back then. And really, I think those low rates did get a lot of froth going in the real estate market that people feel like now is gone or it has been removed, and therefore, real estate's doing terrible. I don't think that's really the case. People are still buying houses and things of that nature. It's just what you're conditioned to.
I think this is, for me, a little bit of a tail wagging the dog thing because we're always talking about it. And the reality is what's going to cause the Feds to cut rates is a slowing economy. Do we really want a slowing economy? I don't think so. And to your point that you mentioned earlier, they raise rates because it may be overheating. And that's what happened in 2021. Caused the problems in the bond market, and the stock market did not respond well the following year either. So I get that it's a little bit of a balancing act all the time, and you have a president that is expecting to insert a new Fed chairman in there, and that I think is going to, we're all going to assume that rates are going to be driven down, but I don't know that it's necessary to the point you're making. I think the cumulative inflation has definitely impacted people since 2021. They're still trying to catch up. If wage growth, because for a while, wage growth was not keeping pace with 8% inflation. But wage growth has now surpassed, at least across the board. I mean, everybody's individual case is different, but across the board, wage growth is now higher, or at least around the same as the inflation rate. So incomes are beginning to catch up, and the rate we are at now is not an insurmountable rate. So I think I think everything is okay is really the big takeaway here. And honestly, I think for me, from an individual standpoint, it still means that you're getting some pretty good yield on a savings account. So the money that's you've got parked, whether it's for an emergency or whether it's for you're saving for some large sum purchase or you're trying to take distributions from your retirement, there's a better way to make some yield on that. And I think it also points out for me, as we'll leave this after this, but I want to hand off to you on it. You talk about debt is bad, debt is bad, debt is bad, and we believe debt is bad, and you want to be debt-free any way you can, but you need to do it smartly. So I think about people who have mortgages that are around the 3% range and they have no plan to leave and they're getting ready to retire and they want to pay that mortgage off, John. But if your money is making 4% or better in the market,
there's an arbitrage there.
Yeah, exactly. Is there really a reason to wipe that debt out, at least in one fell swoop?
Yeah, I think that that conversation comes up all the time in financial planning meetings, and I think that if you've got the cash flow to take care of the mortgage and the mortgage rate is 2 or 3%, then I don't see a reason to pay that off. I really don't, in most cases. Now, all this other debt is a completely different deal. I also want to point out that one of the big motivations, I think, for anybody in government, President Trump in particular, of wanting lower interest rates, that means that they can issue bonds at a lower rate, and that's less money the government has to pay in interest to whoever the bondholders are, and that actually does kind of make the books, that makes the books look a little bit better, but still ugly, ugly. I saw something in the paper just today that the deficit on the budget is under $1 trillion. The deficit on, not the debt, the deficit on the budget is under $1 trillion. What kind of insanity world are we living in when a budget is $1 trillion overspent?
Yeah, that's lower interest rates on bonds is not gonna help that.
Not gonna move the needle at all.
There's got to be a cut in spending. So that's article number one. Second one's going to kind of revolve around a little bit of the same thing, but it's talking about tariffs. So as we take a look at this article from Fortune.com, Fed researchers see a full pass-through of Trump's tariff costs to consumers, adding almost a full percentage point to inflation. So the real takeaway there, this is from Fed staff economists, so they were the researchers here. They found that businesses are passing through essentially 100%, I think it was 90-something% of tariff costs to consumers rather than absorbing them in the margins. Now, the net effect is estimated at roughly plus 1 percentage point on inflation. So that's the real takeaway of the article. And this was the concern when tariffs were first announced, and it's why the market reeled last April when sweeping global tariffs were announced. I think the thing for me, John, though, is you look at one of the little tidbits inside of this article was saying you see this in the numbers, that core CPI, and so they were focusing on consumer prices, not including food and energy costs, which are the most volatile, and we've seen that obviously with the war in Iran drive energy costs up. So this number that we're quoting here in this article is taking that out. It says in March that core CPI was 4.2%. That was the highest it had been in a couple of years, and that was the freakout number, right? Well, guess what? We just got new inflation numbers for April. It was 2.8.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, this is I appreciate the research they're doing, and I'm not arguing the validity of it, but I think it highlights to me that everything is moving so fast, right, that just about the time that you think this is the way it's going, things are different. And we've got a president that's what he banks on, quite frankly. So it's the tariff numbers are going to move, the inflation numbers are going to move, and I think a headline like this may say to people that, it may drive political decisions, it may drive investment decisions, it may drive financial decisions, and I think you have to just be steady in the midst of all this noise.
Yeah, it is all noise, and I was going to tell you a quick story, Scott.
Yeah.
I had a conference in Las Vegas a couple of months ago, and I took the opportunity to on one evening when we weren't doing anything, I took the opportunity to take the team over to the Sphere and see the Wizard of Oz. And it was not, I don't think about the Wizard of Oz in terms of this story and the line in the movie. follow the yellow brick road. That's not what I'm thinking at all. I'm thinking pay no attention to what's going on behind the curtain.
Yeah, right.
Because who knows what the heck is going on, because, we throw tariffs on, then we take them off, and then we throw them on, and then we back them up, and then we raise them, and then we lower them. I have no idea how anybody knows how this is affecting anything. I don't think that companies are going to forever absorb any kind of tariff. But I think it's very, very hard to understand what is really happening when you get all of these mixed signals about whether we're raising tariffs on certain countries or lowering tariffs on certain countries. And the reasons why we do it is that Trump got mad at somebody or whatever, and I'm going to slap a tariff on you. I just don't know that that's any way to run an economy or maybe even a country for that matter.
And I think it is a stress on businesses. I've talked to a couple of clients that, maybe they're purchasers in a retail industry or something, and they're having to deal with shipping their products from overseas, and one day it's more expensive to deal with this country, and then the next day it's more expensive to deal with another country. I know it's a headache. Well, that's an understatement. I think it's very difficult for businesses to operate in this environment. But again, because of the constant change that is going on, I don't see a headline like that and make any kind of major decision. Now, it does go back to us always for focusing on your plan and making sure you're doing the things you need to do to reach financial independence. And so the last couple of articles, as we move on to the next one in just a minute, we're focused on inflation. And I think for me, especially for retirees, who that's the majority of the people that we work with here at GenWealth, it highlights the need to not have a plan that is focused on fixed income in retirement. You got to have a plan to have raises.
You got to have a plan to have raises, and equities and real estate are the only two asset classes that have stayed ahead of inflation historically. And so if you are light or devoid of any of those in your retirement plan, then you probably need to check up and see what's going on. Now, obviously, you don't need to have everything in equities because you do have other risks that you've got to deal with there. But there is a real reason why we at GenWealth believe in the ready to retire process and the flooring and bucketing strategy that we use inside that process to be sure that you have assets allocated to different asset classes to allow you to actually take advantage of what the market can give you and be able to fight inflation.
Yeah, you can't go all in on equities and you can't stay all out on equities even in retirement.
Absolutely.
All right. Our final one is from an Investopedia article. A new bill could erase or cut income taxes for middle-class Americans, and here's how it would work. So this sounds like some good news, and reading through it, I think reading through, I didn't read through the whole bill, right? So I hesitate to say this might be a good thing because it probably was 20,000 pages long, but it is a proposal that basically would eliminate federal income tax for individuals making $46,000 or less, and it would lower income taxes for those making $80,500 or less. So when I read that, my first response was, I love it, but how are we going to pay for it? Keep reading. Higher taxes for everyone that makes over $1 million. Now, I'm going to stay away from the politics on this because I know a lot of people feel just from a morality standpoint that it's okay for millionaires to pay more so that you can give a tax break to the lower class or the middle class Americans. I do like the idea of giving a tax break and maybe even eliminating the tax burden on people that are in that income range, John, because that is where we talked about the cumulative effects of inflation. That's where that has really taken hold. They've squeezed and maybe even gone into negative cash flow.
Well, I think we're kind of I don't know, we're paying attention to the wrong thing here. As we said earlier, we've got a budget that is $1 trillion off kilter. I don't care what you do. You're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic when that happens. Yeah. And so clearly you've got to be in a situation where, you got to vote in such a way that people will pay attention to that. But here's the problem with that, Scott. There are so many people addicted to what the government does for them. I remember I was back in my day of being in the news business. I had a pretty tight relationship with a state senator, and he always said, people are always in favor of cuts. Cut his program, cut their program, but don't cut my program.
Right.
Cut those programs.
Yeah.
But when it comes home to you, then all of a sudden you go, oh, I don't know that we can do that. So that's off the story. But I think that we are paying attention to the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Is it good to give the lower class or the middle class a tax break? Yes, I think it is. I am concerned, frankly, in this country about the great separation between the wealthy and the working class. That is how revolutions start. If you look in history, that is how revolutions start. And I'm kind of a study of history, and so that's a real problem. And when you have such a concentration of wealth in such a few numbers of people, then you really do have a bit of a problem that is brewing there, and hopefully we can figure that out.
Yeah, you're referring to what in the economic term is the K-shaped economy, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that there's people going this way and there's people going this way, and that's propped up the economy to this point, consumer spending, because everybody has so much more equity in their homes and in the stock market. They've seen huge gains, and they are doing great. And it's that other end of that K that is not doing well. So, yeah, I agree entirely. I like the principle of giving them some relief, but it is not it's basically, as you said, rearranging chairs on a ship that's going down in terms of the debt, and there has to be some real reform from government spending for it really to be a meaningful thing for everyone in the long run. All right, well, we just fixed the world's problems, John.
Okay.
We're done with that.
Let's go get lunch.
Not yet.
Not yet.
The Get Ready for the Future show is next.
You've been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
Coming to you from the 6th floor of 3 Financial Center in West Little Rock, Arkansas, this is the Get Ready for the Future show, and we are glad to have you along, where we are helping people discover, protect, and share true financial independence. That is our mission statement at GenWealth Financial Advisors, and it's really why we're on the air here, to offer some education and hopefully some action items for your journey to true financial independence. And we do it in the form of taking your questions. My name is Scott Inman. I'm an advisor here in the West Little Rock office. I had to walk all of about 15 feet to get into the studio today from my office. John Shrewsbury, GenWealth co-founder, co-hosting today, ready to dive into a few financial questions.
Yeah, there's some good questions here, and I am ready to take them on.
All right, well, we'll dive in with Dana from Sherwood. And he writes, Dana is a he. My wife is hesitant about working with a financial advisor. How can I help her feel comfortable and part of the process? Well, it's a great question, Dana, and I think it's a really common situation.
Yeah,
the fact that you're asking it, shows that you already understand your need for a financial advisor, but bringing the spouse alongside is a very delicate and important process. I think we do meet with clients often when they don't bring their spouse, and it's because we've set that appointment, they've called in and wanted to set the appointment, and maybe it was encouraged, maybe it wasn't, but they come in because they think, I handle the finances, and my wife or my husband, whichever way it goes, doesn't really care, so I'm not going to bring them in, and I'm going to deal with it and then go back and tell the spouse. That creates a little bit of a communication gap, because you're going to get a lot of information coming by yourself that you may or may not be able to discern and relay to your spouse. So Dana's locked in on the need to bring the spouse in, and I think that's the first step. But getting her to feel comfortable, John, let's talk about a few things you could do.
Yeah, this is very analogous, Scott, to, you go into your physician and then you go home and you sit down with your wife and go, well, he kind of talks something about surgery, and I don't know, he's going to do this and do that, and you probably, screwed it up from the translation from him to your wife, and then your wife's all confused, and then you just have a mess. And that's the first mess that this creates. The second mess that this creates is it really creates isolation for that other spouse. And so in this case, the wife is not going to know anything. And if Dana passes away, then what is that spouse to do? Why they have no relationship with this financial advisor. Here's this person that is working with them and been guiding them and coaching them on their financial plan and their money, or guiding Dana on his financial plan and his money. But all of a sudden, you have this situation where you have plopped down somebody into the driver's seat of a car that they have absolutely no idea how to drive. And that's a bad, bad equation. Now, what I have found is that there is always a dominant spouse when it comes to money. There always is. But what is incredibly critically important, and I can't stress this enough, Scott, I've been here 35 years in the financial business. I've seen this work and I've seen it not work. So just take my advice on this one thing. The spouse needs to be there so they at least have a tacit understanding of what's going on. And the more you wade into it, the more you will understand, the more you will grow, and the more you will feel in control when the inevitable does happen. So that is a critical part of this equation. I think that sometimes they feel like that maybe there's some preconceptions of what that experience is going to look like. There are people in our industry that are pushy, and you're not going to find that here. We're going to listen. We're going to ask a lot of questions here. One of my big things that I coach our advisors on is you should be listening with your two ears in proportion to the one mouth that the client has.
Right.
You should be listening twice as much as you're doing any kind of talking. And you should be listening to what the client has to say. The only real thing that you ought to be talking about, at least in the first meeting of financial advisor, is asking lots of questions. And the only thing that the people that are coming in for that first appointment as a financial advisor have to decide when they come in is whether there's going to be a second appointment or not. That's really just it. And so just having a conversation about this, I think, kind of softens up the guardedness that is there by a spouse, and in this case, Dana's spouse. But I think that is a critical part of this whole equation, that you ease into this and understand that there isn't any, at least at GenWealth, there isn't anything for sale on that first appointment. We have nothing to sell other than just some time that we're going to give you, and that's not even for sale. That's free for the first appointment. We're going to sit down with you and visit with you and ask a lot of questions, and then we will together determine whether or not that there is any kind of credibility in us helping you or you working with us. And if there is, great, we'll take the next step. If there's not, then we'll try to connect you with whoever it is that you may need help from to try to help you toward financial independence.
Yeah, you mentioned that some advisors in our industry are pushy when it comes to the sales process, and that can be a deterrent for Dana's spouse to come in and deal with. I think the other thing is sometimes they're very technical in their discussions. They talk above or talk down because they do have a lot of knowledge about the industry, and that may be intimidating for your spouse. If that's a reason, I would reframe this whole discussion about going to see the right advisor, that it's not really about money and math, it's about our goals. And if you think about that, I think your spouse has some goals, right? She may not have really ever thought about it, but when it comes to retirement, what does her retirement lifestyle look like? What does she want to gain when they reach financial independence? What are you willing to do to get there? Do you have some things you want to do for your children when it comes to college education? Do you have some things you want to pass on after you're gone? Framing it about that in terms of planning and goal setting, I think, is a really good way to make it real world to somebody that doesn't want to talk about dollars and cents.
Yeah, I think that clearly we have a fiduciary responsibility to the people who come in, and if spouses are involved in any way, shape, form, or fashion, that helps us to meet that fiduciary responsibility. Mm-hmm. I think that you can't be just informed after the fact. Oh, I'll catch up on that when I have to. No, like everything in life, if you get ahead of it, then you're going to be in much better shape than you will if you're in turmoil, in emotional turmoil with a spouse's death. You're confused. You don't understand anything that's been done. All these other voices are beginning to talk to you about what you should do and shouldn't do. If you have that trusted relationship with a financial advisor, and that is really ultimately our goal, is to have a long-term trusted relationship where we are walking side by side with you toward financial independence and helping you along the way. If you have that kind of relationship, then the stress that happens when a spouse passes away is much, much less, not to mention the less stress that you have in working through the details of your financial plan while you're both alive.
Hey, Dana, I hope that helped you. If you want more free info about retirement, investments, and your money, we want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Many of you may be watching the Get Ready for the Future show right now on YouTube. We've got a lot of other resources available to you. And if you're listening on podcast or on our radio show, check us out on YouTube. You'll find some resources there for you that are completely free. Just search for GenWealth Financial Advisors on YouTube. Our next question is from Doug via text message. We're 59 and want to spend more now while we're healthy. Is that reckless or reasonable? Well, Doug, it depends. I think that's a pretty common thing that people talk to us about in retirement. Usually it comes after we have presented the plan, quite frankly.
Yep.
Here's what you can spend now, and with raises later in 20 years, you're going to be bringing home double that, right? I mean, they look at that progression and they go, well, wait a minute. I got $10,000 a month now, and it's going to be $20,000 a month when I'm 80, not doing anything. Mm-hmm. Can we switch that around and spend a little bit more in our early years? And there is this common phrases in the industry that basically breaks down your retirement life into the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. And that is very true. But I think the thing you have to really be careful about is front loading it to the point where you don't have enough to cover the things like health care and maybe even long-term care costs. Because when you're thinking about spending now and you're healthy and you're going to travel, certainly that's going to slow down if you live a long life, but you're still going to maybe need significant income.
I was just thinking, Scott, as you were going through that, go is not the only goal in retirement.
Yeah.
It's just not. It is one of the goals, and it is an important goal without a question. But the fact that you go into slow go and no go years does not necessarily mean you need less money. There's this little thing called inflation that we've been talking about a little bit today, and inflation is going to raise the base cost of living. Yes, your house may be paid for and all of that, but grocery prices are up. Gasoline prices are up. And if you are going to live in this country, you're going to probably spend money on those two things, plus medicine and all the things that are necessary. There is inflation built into all of that. And you've got to think that there is a need for building an inflation-protected retirement income plan. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't front load your retirement, but you have to think about it in terms of, okay, do I have enough to have that glide path upward for inflation, but also have that kind of bunched up 4 or 5, 6 years of extra spending on the front end. And we have software that can actually manipulate that and do that and show you how that can actually play out. It may or may not be reckless based on, Doug's question here. He asked if it was reckless or if it was advisable. Well, it is reckless if you don't have enough money.
That's right.
It's not if you do. And so I think that's the real catch, is that you've got to sit down and have a good, thorough conversation about everything in your financial life to be able to determine whether you've got enough money to do that or not. Because unless all of those questions are answered, then you're going to come up short, because you're going to not account for something, and you're going to come back later and go, oh, by the way, I forgot, we got to buy a new $80,000 SUV. And, I just want to take that lump sum out because I don't want to pay for payments. I just want to pay for it all in one time.
It is reckless if it's whimsical, right?
Yes.
If it's just kind of fly by the seat of your pants, here's what we're going to do. And without a plan, it could create your later retirement. Going back to the go-go years, the research does say that retirees in early retirement spend more and then less in the middle years during the slow-go years, but then more again for health care. So that has to be accounted for. I think about the math having to work first. John talked about the planning. if you're 59, and here's what I think about too, you're not taking any Social Security. Now, we don't know if Doug has a pension in there somewhere, but if all of your front-loaded spending has to be provided by your investment assets before you reach eligibility for Social Security, that's another thing that has to be accounted for, because your spend down could be real detrimental there.
Yeah, it could be, and you know, all of this kind of works together, Scott. It's very much like you know, Legos. You can build it this way, or you can build it this way, or you can build it this way. I've always made that analogy about a financial plan. You just have to understand what the picture is that you're trying to build to. You know, sort of like a puzzle. If you have the box top of the puzzle, and you start putting it together, you can look at it and go, okay, that doesn't work right. That's not where that blue goes, or whatever. So when you're building your financial plan, you have to know what that final picture needs to look like. And that's the reason behind all those questions that we would ask during the initial visit with a financial advisor, is that we need to understand all of that so that we can be sure we've got the entire context. And if you have that entire context, then you can build that front-loaded plan that you are looking for. Now, there's always trade-offs. I tell every client that I work with is that financial planning is at the end of the day is a trade-off. Unless you have mega money and you have maybe this much need and this much money, then it's always a trade-off, because the thing that you do over here is going to affect what you may need to do over here. So I think clearly you can do this, but it does take some work and some research, and that's why you need to sit down with an advisor.
Yeah, a retirement income plan gives you the guardrails and the license to spend, so that you don't just do it frivolously. I coined a phrase years ago, plan spontaneity. I love that in my life, right? I want to be able to go here and go here, but I know where the guardrails are. I know that because I have planned how much I can take out on a monthly basis or how much I can take out on an annual basis to make my plan work. And seeing that on paper, on purpose, seeing where you can spend and where you are going based on assumed rates of return in your investments can give you that freedom to do that, to spend more when you're healthy and go on those trips and do what you want to do at 59. I would say that, Doug, you would want to step into the GenWealth Ready to Retire process to get that started. And anybody else thinking about retiring soon, want to spend early while you're healthy, or just, hey, do I have enough and am I financially independent? The answers are there through the process. You can call 866-653-PLAN. That number again is 866-653-7526, and set your first complimentary appointment with the GenWealth advisor. You can also reach out to us via email if that is more convenient for you. Just send it to info@getreadyforthefuture.com. Our next question on the Get Ready for the Future show. Well, wait a minute. I've got to give Doug his just rewards here. Doug, we're going to name your question the question of the week. So we're going to send you a Get Ready for the Future show tumbler. All you have to do is email us. Send it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Claim it. Say, I want my mug, and tell us where to send it. I said mug. It's a tumbler. Look at it. It's not a mug, but it's nice. And we'll send it to you. And if you want to win that same tumbler, you could be named the question of the week, but you've got to send in the question. You can send that to us via text message like Doug did, or you can even leave us a voicemail at 501-381-5228. Again, it's 501-381-5228. Write that number down and give us your thoughts. What comment or question do you have about your finances, about everything that we talked about on the show when it comes to financial independence? What's on your mind? We want to hear from you. What's on Whitney's mind from Fort Smith is that she is 66. She says, I'm 66 and recently widowed. My spouse handled all of our finances. Where do I even begin? Boy, this kind of dovetails back into the first question we had earlier about bringing the spouse in on your planning process. So we don't know, Whitney, if you had any experience in that. It does sound like she seems a little lost. I think the first thing I would do when you say recently widowed, and I will tell you from my personal experience, I can relate to this. My first wife passed away, so I was a widower a few years ago as well. I think the best thing you can do is not anything right away. You are in an emotional state. You are grieving. You are just trying to get your handle on your new reality, right?
Yeah, and there's a fog that you are in that emotional state, and making, big decisions are hard right there. But sometimes, Scott, there are immediate decisions that have to be made. Going to the Social Security office if you're on Social Security, and being sure that the benefits get straightened out and things of that nature, and maybe changing beneficiaries on accounts. And there's some maintenance things, I will call them. But I think you do need to let that fog lift and be able to make some big decisions. Now, for some people, that is 3 months down the road. For some people, that's a year down the road.
Right.
So for some people, it's a couple of weeks down the road.
Yeah.
They're ready to go. They've been through it. They've done a lot of. Maybe they've had a long illness that they've been dealing with. There is no rhyme or reason to it. People are all different. And so what you've got to be able to do is to have that space to call that shot on your own and not be pushed into something by a family member, financial advisor, or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it highlights the importance of using a financial advisor too. I'll use my own case in this. I was the 2-week guy. I am in the industry, so I needed that work to kind of get me going again.
Right.
But I didn't need to do it alone. I brought you and I brought Janet in. We had some meetings. I needed other people, even though this is what I do for a living, to have some objective insight brought into the equation. So I think it does highlight, Whitney, you probably do, once you've paused enough that you're ready to act. I think the first step would be to find a financial advisor and go through that process. And I know if you haven't worked with one, if your husband didn't work with one, that's going to be a potentially hard process for you to go through. But you need to find somebody that can walk through this with you, because there's going to be a lot of things that you may not be familiar enough with to make good decisions on. I think about like life insurance claims. Do you even know if there was life insurance? Likely, if your husband was working, there probably was a group policy somewhere through the employer. You'd have to reach out to the employer. And I think having someone guide you through that process is vital.
Scott, let me give 3 people that someone needs around them during this situation. You've talked about the financial advisor. I think that you also have to have an estate planning attorney and a CPA, because there are things that you need to do now that you are a single person in the relationship, as opposed to 2, you now have 1. And you have to be sure that if you have done estate planning, that anything that needs to be updated, and you get that taken care of. If you've never done estate planning, now you have all of the resources of your family in your hands. Then what? What do you want to have happen to that? That's where the estate planning person comes in. And then the CPA. I think that oftentimes I see the ball dropped with CPAs when they are dealing with widows. I just had this case happen. One of our clients, her husband passed away. She went to the CPA. They filed the final joint return. The CPA clearly knew that whole thing was going to change as far as things like withholdings and things of that nature, because you go from being married and filing jointly to filing single.
Yeah.
And that changes the math on the taxes. Well, she ended up owing a lot of money in taxes when she filed this year, and the CPA really didn't give her any advice on that. And so it's really one of those things that I think that you've got to have those 3 people around you. They have to be trusted advisors. And here's the key. They all have to be working together. Now, they don't all necessarily have to be in the same office or the same building or anything of that nature, but they all have to be communicating. And that is an incredibly critical part of this part of your life, is that you find those trusted advisors. If you don't already have them, you find those trusted advisors to walk along beside you in this, because that's what they do. That is their gift. That is their expertise. They need to be able to help you.
You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to take the next right step. And as John has already clearly identified, surround yourself with people who can help you take it. We also do offer estate planning services here at GenWealth. So for anyone listening or watching, want you to know we have an in-house estate planning specialist. And man, she is busy these days. I tried to book one on her calendar the other day, and I had to go a couple weeks out. So you might have to wait a couple weeks, but hey, reach out and hook up for your consultation with our in-house estate planning specialist.
I was going to give some perspective on that. I think that is the biggest gap that if I look across the country, there's 50% of the people that are working have some savings in retirement, so there's a little bit going on there. But when it comes to estate planning, there's like, I don't know, 20 or 30% of the population even have a will.
Yeah.
And so you have a big mess that's coming down the road unless you get that taken care of.
Yeah. All right, we've got just a few more minutes left for our final question. Christian from Little Rock. My wife wants to move into a retirement community early for the lifestyle. How do we weigh the financial side? Retirement communities can certainly offer great freedom, community, some socializing that you need in that stage of life, but it also comes with a real price tag. So when you weigh the financial side, there's a lot to it, Christian. So it's good, first of all, that you're thinking about it early. Lifestyle and finances are the same decision. They just need to be modeled together. So it's not an automatic yes or no for me. I mean, I'm sure he's done a little research on this, but it's going to be a pretty significant cost to move into that, but you're going to be able to offload a lot of costs or expenses as well.
Well, and there's all kinds of different iterations of this. Early on, Hot Springs Village was a retirement community. It's where people went and they lived independently, but that was called a retirement community. But also a assisted living, nursing home type setting is also a retirement community. So there is a lot of variations in between. I think you have to think about, okay, what is it that I need now? And then ask the question, what is going to be available if my needs change down the road? So just think about, you may be totally independent living right now, and you don't really need a lot, but you would like to be able to socialize in a group setting and things like that. That's sort of the original Hot Springs Village kind of deal. And so that is cool. But are there other facilities nearby that, as your needs change, maybe you need some help with, just taking care of things around the house and being sure you don't have a yard to mow and all those types of things. Those things can be sort of a progressive type thing. Obviously, the more care, the more attention, the more things that someone does for you through a service like that, the more expensive it's going to be.
Yeah, and all the services, we don't know that, but we know the fees can certainly add up. Is there an entry fee for getting into that community? So you just have to kind of accumulate all of the upfront costs and take a look at the ongoing fees and then compare that against your current home expenses, the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the utilities, the maintenance, all of that is in the healthcare maybe that you might be replacing if there's going to be some included in the cost of the retirement community. That can really help you make the financial decision. But I think, I thought about this as I was reading the question. I think about the timing piece to it. We don't know how old Christian and his wife are or when they plan to do this. But I think there's a little bit of a balance there in determining if you go in at an earlier age when you're still healthy and you don't really need very much and you're just seeking the lifestyle might be great, but you're giving up some level of freedom with what you have in your own home, and you're going to have to pay those fees for a longer period of time, and now those are also disconnected from any kind of equity that you might have from being a homeowner.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing I'll add here, Scott, is that, I think it makes sense to think about that progression that I was talking about, because I have, in my personal experience, I have had family members that just, they were not going to do anything until their hand was forced. And then the people around them could not care for them at home. And so, boom, all of a sudden you go from living at home into a nursing home. And that is a real shocker to a lot of people. Plan ahead, think about a progression in this if this is something that is really seriously on your mind.
Well, you heard the bell there as the time has reached the last couple of minutes of our show today. We're out of time on the program, but we do have just a couple of minutes left for our final thoughts, John.
Scott, I'm going to circle back to something that we had in our earlier segment where we were talking about the fact that there's so much noise out there about stuff, and what you really need is a big, broad-based plan that you stick to. As a financial advisor, it is our job to help you to maintain the course of things when things get crazy, whether it's interest rates or volatility in the market or a war or come what may, or all of that is out of your control. The thing that you've got to do is to do what is in your control. And we have so much control over how we plan, what we think about, how we approach things, and actually putting those plans into action. Those things are incredibly critical to success in your life and in retirement. And if you miss that, then you really do get kicked around by the chaos and the things that you hear on TV or radio or what have you that are happening right now that really don't have a lot to do with your financial independence.
Yeah, I think planning is number one. And number two, for me, one of the best things you can do is not flinch, right?
Yes.
You have to stay steady in the face of all this and believe in the investment strategy that you've picked. If you need an investment strategy and you need a plan and you're ready to see if you're financially independent, I want to encourage you to reach out to us and walk through the GenWealth Ready to Retire process. Do that by calling 866-653-PLAN, 866-653-7526, or send an email to info@getreadyforthefuture.com. And that is all the time we have for this week's show. Appreciate all the questions coming in. If you've got one, send them in to us. Either text it or leave a voicemail at 501-381-5228. Hope you have a great week and hope you make time for us again next week. See you then.
The GenWealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.